All right. My father was a consummate teacher. From the time I was a young girl, he was always trying to teach me. Tutoring at dinner. He was a math and a history teacher. I was not great with either of those subjects and tried to avoid him whenever I could. He would always give me directions even though I knew how to drive. He'd say, get on the freeway right here. And he was waiting for me to have children because then he could take over and start tutoring them because I was so good at avoiding it. Although I still hear his voice correcting my grammar. He would always say, do not say you are good, you say you are well. And whenever a friend of mine says good, I'm like, well. I'm like, oh no, I'm my father. My firstborn son, unfortunately, was born with a congenital heart defect. And it was really difficult. He only lived to be 5 years old. And my father was so involved, and my mother, both of them. I could not have gotten through it without their help. After my son died, my dad would still come over every week. I had a 2-year-old son, and it was a really sad situation. First of all, my 2-year-old son was always melting down and having tantrums, and he didn't speak. And he didn't need to, because my son that passed away, Jason, was so buoyant and vibrant and talkative, kind of did all the talking for him. And my father would be outside in the car, and I'm wondering why he wasn't coming into my house. So I would go out to the car and knock on the window, and he was sobbing, just sobbing, because he couldn't come in the house. He was too distraught. So the grief was terrible, but he had a very, very close attachment to my 2-year-old son, Danny. I started Danny in speech therapy, and he was struggling in school. It was just such a blow to have such a talkative child gone and then have this child that was screaming and having tantrums. He would fall to the ground, kick, scream, and chase me. And then he would finally be so exhausted, he would blow his nose all over my shirt. I'd have snot. And then he would be sweet again. He would cry about he wanted a flag on the flagpole or to be the first one downstairs. He would yell at me, I want to be the first, I want to be the first. So I would go back up the stairs and say, okay, go ahead, you're the first. But that didn't satisfy him, and he'd have a total tantrum. So with these situations in mind, my father never lost patience with my son. And by 5th grade, he was still struggling. I still remember he had a state report, and his state that he chose was Nevada. And he couldn't do it. He was having a total meltdown, and my father said, Judy, we're typing his report. And I said, no, that's his report. I don't do a report for him. He goes, we're doing a report. Sit down, I'm dictating. So I couldn't argue. I sat down, I typed the report. I had a younger daughter at the time. She came running in, I'll do the cover. And she drew a cactus, and that was the cover. And he turned in his report so he could feel like any other child in the class and not feel humiliated that he hadn't done it. He continued to do better because I became a full-time advocate. I would be in a room with 10 lawyers, and it was just me and another mother who was helping me, and I never lost. I always won because I wouldn't give up. Most parents would quit because it was exhausting, but I documented everything, and I won a non-public school for him where he thrived. And my father became so involved that he knew every teacher. At back to school night, I was invisible. It was Grandpa Lee. He had a hat that said Grandpa Lee. And all of the teachers were so excited to talk to Grandpa Lee. And my dad was it was the highlight of his life to be there. He told Danny, you're going to go to college, and not a community college. You're going to go to a 4-year college. You can do it. And he did. He went to a 4-year college. And my father died before he could see him graduate. And when he graduated, the two of us knew that he was above watching over Danny and proud of him. And it was a difficult time because it was after my father's death that I decided I felt so lonely in my marriage. I got divorced. My other 2 children came with me, and Danny worried about his father and stayed with him. But after 6 months, he moved in with me. He didn't know what to do with his life. He didn't want to do psychology, which is what his major was, so he did taxes, which ironically is what my father used to do in the summers when he was a teacher. So doing taxes did not satisfy him, and for 6 years he did that, until one day he came home and he said, "Mom, there's a program in Las Vegas where I could be a teacher, and they train you and you're in the classroom and you make good money within 10 weeks. So he went to Vegas, first time living on his own. And I was so proud. I went with him and set him up, and I visited almost every month and watched him grow. He was teaching first grade, then kindergarten, and one Thanksgiving I visited. And we were in the car and he got a text message. He said, "Mom, I can't see it. Can you please read it to me?" So I said, "Sure." And it said, "Mr. Unger, my daughter never wanted to go to school until she was in your class. You have made such a difference. She loves to read. She loves to go to school. It's Thanksgiving, and I want you to know how thankful I am." I started to cry, and I just thought about the fact that how did my father know? How did my father know that his grandson would go on to be a teacher just like him? Maybe he did, but either way, I am so proud of my son, and I'm so thankful for my father.